What's your view on these changes that we're seeing to stage 3? Many of your constituents would be affected, likely now to receive half of what they were going to. Higher income earners will receive less than half of what they were going to under the original plan. What's your read on it?
Well, obviously I'll wait and see what the government actually announces on Thursday and make an assessment based on that. But I've put a survey out to 77,000 households in my electorate, and the results of that are, with my newsletter, results of that are starting to come in, and 60% of the respondents in my electorate that stands to benefit more are saying that they are actually open to either getting rid of the stage 3 tax cuts or reshaping them. So while I think people really do care about broken promises, they also recognise that when circumstances change, policy needs to change as well.
This has been a big issue for independents and for you personally, is that issue of integrity and improving politics. Are you worried that the way the government's managed this particular matter by saying one thing before the election and changing now subsequently, that is a breach that will damage not just the government, but politics in Australia more broadly?
I think it is a real problem when politicians break promises. And really, if this was the intention of the government before the election, they should have had the courage to say that. The reality is, circumstances changed during COVID. We now have double the national debt that we did before COVID. But at the last election, neither party was willing to have that brave conversation about what we need to do on tax reform. So the government is guilty of being a bit gutless before the last election. Similarly, the coalition was not presenting any solutions to addressing some of the deeper issues we have in our tax system.
But as you did point out earlier, the circumstances have changed. This is going to be the argument the Prime Minister will make in the caucus this afternoon, at the National Press Club again tomorrow, and he will argue that it is timely to help those earning less than $150,000 a year, given the cost of living pressures. And it's interesting that you're picking up from your constituents, even though they would benefit from the original stage 3 tax cuts, that they don't mind these amendments.
Well, about 12% of my electorate earns more than $180,000. And certainly there are people amongst that group who are going to be really annoyed about this. The majority of people are not in that highest tax bracket, but even some of the people who are in that tax bracket recognise that the cost of living pressures are real at the moment, and they are not the ones having to make a decision about how to make ends meet now. So there is some recognition amongst that group that cost of living relief is necessary. We need to find a way to do that that's not inflationary. Now, the reality is these tax cuts, whether they go through in their original form or they're reshaped, are likely to be inflationary. So I suppose the challenge the government has is to try to get the maximum cost of living benefit that's possible if it's going to go ahead with something that's potentially inflationary.
And just finally, do you think that the idea behind this, as the government will argue, even though they've broken a promise, they're going to make it fairer, is that something that resonates? Will it resonate in WA?
Well, I think that people do have a general interest in a tax system that's fair. And what we need to be doing is having a much broader conversation about how to make our tax system fair. At the moment, we have probably a 2% structural deficit, double the national debt that we had before COVID. It's easy for politicians to talk about tax cuts, but no one's willing to talk about where the money is actually going to come from. It's not a magic pot. So we do need to be talking about broadening the consumption tax base, probably increasing it, overall reducing the burden that's carried by income earners, and share that across the whole community so that we can afford the services that we want. We need aged care. We want to have an NDIS system that provides, and we need to be willing to have that conversation about where the money is actually going to come from, rather than only ever talking about tax cuts.
Member for Curtin, Kate Chaney, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Kieran.